So in today's video, we're going to talk about growth medium. There's millions of them out there, but today we've got 5 different ones here, and we're going to talk about how they're made, what their pros are, and probably which one you should be using. Everywhere you look, there's a new growth medium, whether that's, hemp-based or cocoa-coir-based or who knows. There's always some new one coming out on the market, but essentially they're similar to existing ones. So in today's video, we're going to go through these ones here I've got in front of me, which are Easy Plugs from Holland, Growth Sponge, which is plain man-made foam. We've got compressed Peat plugs. We've got Jiffy Plugs and Old Faithful Rockwool. So let's talk about Rockwool. Rockwool is made from basalt rock and chalk. It's melted together at super high temperatures, around 1600 centigrade, which is what, nearly 3000 degrees Fahrenheit. Once it reaches a lava kind of consistency, it's spun in a very similar way to cotton candy, candy floss, or whatever you call it in your country. It's got a bit of a bad rap because it's not particularly good for the environment, or the way that they make it. The mining of it and the way it's made is not that good for the environment, but it's an incredibly good, time-tested growth medium that pretty much guarantee you've used this in the past. If you haven't, why not? Because it's really good. Straight out of the factory, they're actually quite alkaline. So what you should be doing is balancing that pH by rinsing it in a neutral pH solution and then allowing them to dry out before you use them for your growth. Rockwool's got excellent water retention and drainage. It's sterile and inert. It can potentially be used again depending on what you're growing in it, but once the roots go through, you're just going to throw it away. It's super cheap too. So it's just a really nice, simple, straightforward growth medium. Now we're going to move on to these little wonders. These are compressed peat-based grow cubes. There's lots of different sizes, types, and brands of this, but it's essentially all the same thing. Some people will say as a selling point that it's good for the environment. Anything that involves peat cannot be good for the environment. But we have to balance that against our growing, because we're already doing something that's better for the environment by growing at home. It's much better water consumption growing in hydroponics than it is in traditional methods, unless you live in the UK where it pisses down rain all the time. It does all the watering for you. So peat is mined from peat bogs, and predominantly those bogs are in Canada, in Europe, and in Russia. The peat bog is drained of water and allowed to dry out so that the solids matter within that bog is allowed to come to the surface. It's cut with the special tools to bring out slabs of peat that is then dried, usually naturally, but also in factories. Once it's dried, it's then usually milled or sieved to get rid of any large particulate. And peat is quite acidic, so it is then balanced and treated with lime to bring that alkalinity back up to a more favorable 6.5 pH. Sometimes you'll find some of these that have additional particulates such as perlite, sand, anything like that can be added, and that's more of a selling point for those that want aeration and drainage. These are great. These have high water retention, they're lightweight, but the drainage isn't as good as the Rockwool. Rockwool is non-biodegradable. This is semi-biodegradable, but it does take an awfully long time to break down. It will split apart, but it will just sit there on the surface for a good while. Next, we're going to talk about Easy Plugs. Easy Plugs come from Holland. These are starter cubes that are sold under the premise that they carry the right amount of air, moisture, and fertilizer for your seedlings. Now let's just get one out so you can see it on the camera here. They do it in different shapes and sizes, but this one is obviously, as you can see, this is about a 1.5 inch cube here. you can also see it's incredibly fragile. Now, I actually am not a fan of these. I was given loads, or maybe a year ago, and I just hated them for hydro because they fall apart. They fill your equipment with small flecks of this, which is again a peat based, but also has coco coir added into it. It's then compressed into these small cubes, and then once you start soaking them, they expand and you put your seeds in there. If you want to get these for seedlings, there's specific types for that as well. But me personally, after using these for about 5 minutes, I was so fed up with them just completely breaking down in the water that I gave up. These are great if you are going to do traditional gardening outside, or a place and leave situation where you're going to start your seed or put your seedling in here and not mess around with it. You're not going to move it, you're not going to trim it, you're not going to do anything with it. There's nothing squirting against it. You're just going to, once it's ready, it's going to go into soil and be left. That is a good thing for these. I think they're great for that, but they're not really good for hydroponics. They are pH neutral, they are stable in that respect. They have excellent water retention and drainage. They are completely biodegradable, and that doesn't surprise me because they break down like that. And they are sterile. The quality of these is pretty good, but it's down to what you're going to do with it. Next is Jiffy pellets. These things have been around for donkey's years, and I'll show you what they do in a moment, but in their raw form, they look like this with a little indent in the top here. What they are, again, is peat moss based with coco coir added in, and the whole thing is shrouded by a biodegradable netting. And as they expand and your plants and your roots start permeating through that medium, the netting just disappears, and then you're left with a nice little plug that is kind of similar in respect to these easy plugs. These are kind of designed for the use and leave situations, so where you don't have to keep moving things around. But again, they do drop quite a bit of particulate, so I don't recommend these for hydroponics where particulate can block up filters and pumps, because these will do that. Jiffy plugs are completely biodegradable. They are space saving. They're tiny when they're in their dried form, and they are available in peat or coco coir versions only as well, if that's something that you would like to go. I've not tried the coco coir versions, so I imagine that they would drop less particulate than the peat ones, but let me know if you've tried those and what you think of them. Final one we're going to talk about is sponge. Most of the time in commercial environments, sponge is used because it's completely stable and it doesn't break down. It can be reused over and over again, as long as your root growth comes out the bottom and doesn't sit in the middle here. If you've got something growing inside this bit of sponge and the roots start to make their way through that foam, then your plant's kind of stuck. You can't take that off. You pull the roots off. You're best off just leaving it there. These really are good for transplanting things that you've grown in, like a rock wool cube. You can start your seedling in a rock wool cube and transplant it once it's at a good size into a foam plug like this. And as long as that root ball comes out past the bottom, then these will work. They do have good water retention. They're completely sterile and inert. They are reusable as long as you don't allow that root structure to permeate through it. And these are great for hydroponics as long as you know about that root structure. But the synthetic sponge is not particularly environmentally friendly and non-biodegradable, but you kind of want that. You don't want it breaking down. So if you're going to use this for transplanting, you don't want it to break down. So this kind of has a positive there. Almost every commercial grower will use these, just in much larger forms, especially over in Asia in their hydroponic farms, where they grow all their salads, lettuce and everything in these. So they're very popular. Everyone has a preferred growth medium for growing specific things, and the opinions on those are going to be varied and wide. I have my preferred one to use. Let me know what growth medium you prefer to use and for what. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put up on the screen here a a comparison chart where you can see things like the ingredients, the water retention, aeration, pH, nutrient retention, etc., all for the ones that we're looking at today. And then if you want to download that, I'll make it available on my website. You can just download this and you can decide which plants you want to grow with what medium. Bit of a touch on growth medium for hydroponics. Let me know in the comments what medium you use and for growing what. Next week, we're gonna start a new carrot aeroponics using a standalone misting system straight off of Amazon. So if you wanna get stuck in with growing carrots at home in an super cheap DIY aeroponic system, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you next week.